I don't know, man. I woke up and I found myself here. But hey, at least I found myself. Yeah, that's good. So yeah, so you just before we hit the live button here, we were talking about my Plex server, right? So I I used to have this 10 terabyte hard drive plugged into the back of my NVIDIA Shield, and I was using that to serve my media. But it's not like I have that much. I don't have 10 gigabytes worth of stuff. I do have like probably 3. But then I also have like a couple other online servers that have content. And so, oh, am I? Okay, hold on one second. Let's do this. Okay, is that better? Yeah, much better. Okay. So in that case, let me change this to this. Okay. And so because I have these other online places where I also keep files, I couldn't really connect those through the Shield. And I also had all this leftover space, like, 7 gigs worth of, or 7 terabytes, pardon me, worth of storage that was just kind of sitting over there. And I had it mounted kind of on my computer as this external drive, through CIFS. And so I was like, dude, what I need to do is just move that over here, connect it directly to my computer, and then broadcast like a Samba share or something back to the Shield. And so that's what I did. Mm-hmm. And you'll see now, like the online repositories that I have are now also in the Shield, which is great.
I just love that NVIDIA has continued to manufacture that. Like that, that is, and make interesting updates to it. And they released a new remote system. And it's like, all the other stuff they do, very fancy, but they're like, why wouldn't we continue? We love this thing. We're going to continue to sell it. It's just kind of a fun little thing that they do.
Yeah, the newest version of it, I think, came out in the 2019, the Shield. But actually, I have the 2017 version. So this is like going on 9 years old.
Still runs great.
Actually, it still run. Not only does it run great, but I think it's actually the best Android box that you can get. I mean, the processor's fast. Everything about it is fast. And it's the version that I have is, it's got like a better GPU, a better all this other kind of stuff that's in it that somehow they downgraded for the newest version. So it's actually one of those rare things where the newest version is not as good as the older version. I think the Apple TV 1 or 2, when they first came out, they had like a accessible hard drive and all this other kind of stuff that you could do with it. That then when the Apple 3 came out, Apple TV 3, and now of course with the 4 and the 4 HD, like you can't do any of that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And so that is one of those cases where it's like, oh man, we should never have given that functionality out there.
Well, it's like different audiences. So like what I use mine for, I think I have the 4 HD, I think. But I mean, it's purely a streaming box. Like I don't even have the Apple TV thing enabled. It's just like,
I don't either.
You go to your streaming app, you hit play, it plays. Like that's all I wanted to do. And so I actually have a home theater PC. It's a little mini PC. It's like, well, if I want to use expandable storage, or if I want to bring a USB key with, family videos on it or something, just plug it into that. But I'm not expecting to do that with my Apple TV box. Like that is
right.
That's to get third-party content, branded content displayed correctly. I don't want to worry about like, is it synced? Is the lip sync correct? Or which language did I turn the subtitles on? Like, I just want it to be a seamless, easy experience for everybody. And it does that really well. So, I've been messing with and I know like this podcast, you wanted to talk about religion, which is perfect. So yeah, we'll get
teaser. As a teaser for anybody out there, we're going to talk about some controversial stuff today because we're talking about religion. But before we get there, I've been messing with my computer. I basically literally tore it down to the stud, reinstalled like Bazite on it, which is this containerized Fedora model, and literally kept it like completely sandbox. Because what I wanted to do with it was I wanted to have a home server that would spin up. And so I've got Nextcloud running on it. I've got Image running on it, which is this Google Photos kind of clone but you can host all your photos and do shares. I routed it through. I set up Cloudflare, so now I route it through all the reverse proxies. So now we have like
HTTPS links for cloud.hemati.com and photos.hemati.com and whatever. And it all goes right to those. And then I set up a Jellyfin server too, because I was like, well, while I'm at it, Plex is awesome, but it also has its, it has its thing. So let me just spin this up and see what it's like. I think I like the Jellyfin server better than Plex. I think it's really, really cool. Yeah, I'll create a user for you and send you a link, but it's, it's all the same stuff. So like if Plex is working for you, great. But if you want to play around with it, I just see
I want to put together a home lab server for myself. So I've got someone who's been around computers a while. I have sort of a variety that I can, like, what would I do? And one of the things that I have just laying around is a 2013 Mac Pro, trash can Mac. And it is maxed out. It is the 12-core, 24-thread Xeon, has 64 gigabytes of ECC server RAM in it. It's got dual GPU.
So jealous right now.
Well, that's the thing is it's older hardware. So like running, so you can, the Apple has long since discontinued any support and software for this. And so running Mac OS on it is just very degraded experience. Like there's ways to hack and get the newer versions running, but they don't work really well. A lot of apps will crash or they won't be able to respond to display events and stuff. And so it's like, well, Mac OS has left it behind. That's fine. But Linux still works beautifully on it. It's an Intel machine. So I thought this would be the perfect server because, you could put 2-3 terabytes in it and then you don't even need external stuff. And then just have it, set up cloud sharing. I want to run, oh gosh, what's the name of that? Open Web UI. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it lets you hook up basically. So you own, so think about like ChatGPT. You've got the interface ChatGPT, and then you've got the models behind it. So what this is it basically is a ChatGPT style interface, but the model behind it, you point at whatever you want. So you can point it to whatever API keys from the big providers. You can go to OpenRouter. You can point it to your own locally hosted LLM or whatever. But then it keeps your conversations there. So your conversations are yours. They happen on your own server. And then you remote into it. And then you buy your tokens, a la carte instead of having like these memberships and stuff. And so if you're like, well, I really like the way Gemini handles PDFs, and I really like the way ChatGPT does this, and I really like the way all these different models do their thing. And so you basically have access to all of them simultaneously within the same interface. And since it runs on your hardware, you're the one that controls the chat logs, where things are stored. You never have to worry about, it's like, there's a server glitch and I got someone else's chat logs. And what is this? Kind of thing. Do they have mine? What's happening?
Well, I got to tell you, I'd love to, whenever you get this set up, I'd love to see what you did with it. And actually, I'm going to make a note to explore that on my own. That sounds really awesome. Because
that's my summer project.
What I've been doing is like, I've been working with Gemini to build out like, so what I did is when I was experimenting with Cas OS and then Cosmic and a couple other things. And I just was like, I feel like every time I'm doing stuff here, it's like I'm fighting with the system. So either I had like Cache OS, which was Arch Linux wide open, totally mutable. And that you could do whatever you wanted with, but then it was like,
it will not hold your hand.
Well, you could also see like, okay, now because I did that, now this no longer works. It's just all these different things like that. Yeah. And so then when I went back to an immutable system, Fedora, Silverblue, Bazite, whatever you want to call it, then it was like, oh, but I'm missing this. I need that, whatever. And so then I went and experimented with that custom image that I was telling you about. And that worked out great for a minute. But I was still like, just like anytime I would build something, it just wasn't, it was like, I'm like, and of course I'm talking to Gemini, it's giving me things to try. Now I can read enough of the code where I'm like, I don't think that's going to work because whatever. Yeah. Oh, you're right. But
Docker's going to say no to that one.
When we get it, then I would try it. And then of course it would, error or whatever. I'd come back over here. Here's the problem. And after one session, I was staying up till like 2, 3 in the morning, playing with this stuff. And I was like, I just feel like this is way harder than it needs to be. There's no way, like that. I know other people are doing this. There's no way that they're fighting with their system as much. So either your knowledge set is deficient, or like my framework is totally wrong with the way we're approaching it. And so it was kind of fun because it goes, it thinks for a minute, and then it comes back and it goes, well, the problem is that you asked me for these things, and so I'm giving you these things. But yes, your approach is completely wrong. What you need to do, if you're going to use this system, you need to use, instead of using Docker, you should use Podman. Instead of having these rootful containers, you should have rootless containers. Instead of this, you should have that. Instead of this, you should have that. And I'm like, okay, so just pretend I don't know anything. Pretend every question I've asked you.
Do it.
Pretend every question I've asked you is completely ignorant, right? And just here's what I'm trying to accomplish. How would you set it up? And on this system, da 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 da. And it was amazing. I had everything set up in like 2 hours, and I'd been wrestling with just one of these for like 3 days, and even when it was working, it was kind of like you were afraid it was going to fall apart at any moment, And so now everything, like literally, I don't have any system services running at all except for the host system. Mm-hmm. All of my services, and in fact, I've eliminated all my user services as well, the systemd services, except for my rclone mounting the drives that I need. Everything else is a Podman container. Everything. Yeah.
You spin most of them down, restart them.
Oh, it's incredible. And now too, I figured out how to use GitHub. So now I've got a .files repository and literally all my containers, everything. And I even have a install script that I built that uses Stow to like manage all your symlinks. I don't know if you've ever messed with that. That is phenomenal. I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, this is unbelievable. Like it'll symlink a directory, or if the directory already exists, it'll symlink every file that you need into that directory. Boom. And I'm just like, golly, this is crazy. So now, like, even if everything goes to hell, the house burns down, I can literally get a new computer, clone my repo, hit install, and I will be completely back up and running in like 10 minutes, which is unbelievable considering all the work that, yeah, exactly. So, but I feel like too, I was talking to one of my buddies about this, and he was like, man, it just sounds like a lot of work. I said, I don't know why I was so fascinated with it, but I am fascinated with it. It would be really cool to figure out how to monetize what I've learned, now. Oh, yeah. As well, because like it's so like far beyond what most people are doing. But like I have so much comfort with my system now. Like no app can even talk to the other apps, unless I explicitly give them permission. So if you on most computers, people know I'm going to click this link in my Google Calendar, and it's going to open up Zoom and plug me into this meeting. Well, you can't do that if you don't give permission to the apps to talk to each other. So like on a normal computer, you can't even isolate those things. Like, so when I was looking at installing OpenClaw, which is what I was really wanting to play with, right? Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Your video kind of froze. Okay.
Oh.
When I was looking at it, what started the whole process was me wanting to experiment with OpenClaw and build like an AI admin assistant type of thing. And
Jarvis.
I was like, well, I can't install it. Yeah, I need to buy another computer to spool this up on, so it's just protected. And I'm like, that's stupid. Like if I had an actual containerized system, I could spin it up in a container, isolate the container from everything, and that would be totally fine. If it doesn't work, just shut it down. If it needs access to something I want to give it, it can't see it, And so
it craps the bed. You just turn it off, disable it. Yeah.
And now I can actually do that. And so anyway, I'm pretty fired up about it.
Yeah. It's funny your experience with the LLMs giving like really bad advice unless you are in the lane that they're like. One of my little hobbies, is programming, and one of the languages that I work in sometimes is JavaScript. And there's so much JavaScript out. It's probably that one and Python are the two most used languages. And there's repos full of JavaScript for everything, whatever. And so you could talk to a pretty small LLM, and it has like JavaScript omniscience. Like you just be like, so how do you do this? It's like, oh, well, here's 15 different ways to do it. All of them work, and you're like, well, which one is better and why? And it'll give you like a PhD dissertation on it. It's like, and it's correct. It's really There's a few exceptions, but for the most part, it's amazing. But then the other language that I use, the one that I prefer, Smalltalk, man, it is confidently knows nothing. Like it's bizarre. It'll write something else like, oh, no problem. Here's how you do it. It's like, no, none of those things are correct. None of them. It's like this won't work, and they're like, no, it will. Or I'll give it something like, hey, how would I make this one faster? I'll give it a code snippet. It's like, well, that'll give a bug, and it's amazing. But it's because if you think about like a distribution curve, if you're inside the center part of the distribution curve for that model, it produces really, really good answers. But if you're on the tail ends, and especially if you're at the very far tail,
some edge use case or something that's nobody's really tried to do before.
Yeah. Or something that would only data like once, which is why, by the way, such a bad time with like citations. Like if you ever ask an LLM, like, hey, here's a quote I was thinking of that I heard 10 years ago, but I can't remember who said it. And it'll be like, oh, no problem. That was said by John Lennon in 1963. And here you go. It was in his book of poetry or whatever. It's like, nope,
right.
Not that book doesn't exist, kind of thing. But it's like the citation for that appears once in this training data, so it's way out on the tail, and so it's going to have a hard time averaging into that spot way over there. Where something like how do you loop over an array, or how do you set up a Podman in Fedora? That's like, oh, that's in the center. Where like, how do you set up Docker in Fedora? Why would you do that? Fedora has Podman built in. You're like,
right.
Why are you running Docker?
Well, because though, like for people like me too, who are
and they'll guess, but it's
well, that's what I'm saying. Like for people like me who are just intelligent enough to be dangerous and incompetent, we'll go, oh, I saw that you can do this, and so hey, I need to be installing things with Docker. Yeah, Docker's the new thing. So how do I use Docker on my computer? Well, you do this, right? And it's like not even asking like, should you be doing that?
Right. It's just trying to please you. It's trying to help.
Right. They're just trying to help. Yeah.
Trying to help.
Right. Okay. So before we get into the religion conversation, I did want to touch on, because we had an open loop from last conversation. Ravi had sent over that, or was it Rami or somebody had sent over that AI doomsday guy that's like, hey, AI is coming for everybody. The Chris Hughes dude, you were like, oh yeah, I'm going to listen to that. Did you ever get a chance to finish that?
I did not. I'm sorry.
But you watched enough of it to know that he was didn't know what he was talking about. I think if I recall.
Oh, the one where I was like, this guy is total. This is going to be really bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what were your thoughts on that?
I did watch it. Let me pull up. I made some notes about this. Hold on a second.
I should try and see if I can find the video while you're doing that. But yeah, tell us what you thought.
So let me see if I can find it here. Just give me 1 second. History. Wow, I watch a lot of YouTube.
I know I do too.
This is
funny thing is, I don't even watch a lot of it. Like I just have it going in the background. It's like,
like if you ever try to find something in your history, you're like, what? I don't know.
Well, it used to be I had like CNN or MSNBC or something playing, and now it's like, gosh, I can't. That stuff is all poison and mostly lies. So just turn that off completely.
It's not going to help you. Yeah, I can't find it now.
That's all right. But
yeah, it was so the issue with it, if I remember correctly, is that it's it's basically people who are reading the hype, and they're not like they're not running into so when I say like, hey, you got to find things that are inside that average thing, and then say, well, look, the thing that it is going to do is it's going to produce the most average possible results out of that group. So if you're looking at it like, well, average of what? It's like,
because why? Because it's incentivized to do that.
No, that's that's what the structure of it does.
Okay.
It tries to find the most likely next word. Most likely is a set of averages, right? So average is too. It's too it's simplistic. It conveys the idea that like when you're consulting AI, you're not consulting something that is intelligent in the way that you and I are intelligent. It's that it's giving you the average of all the stuff that it has been trained on. Which, by the way, 40% of them, 40% of the AIs out there, 40% of their training data is Reddit, right? So just think about like 40% of the average that you're going to be handed as the truth, because it always talks as though like this is just true, you know?
Yeah.
Is a distillation of things said on Reddit. So it's like, well, sometimes the average is really, really useful. Like I don't want to poo-poo that at all. Like I think it is for some tasks, like summarizing is one of the gold standards for it. Like you can dump, a 500-page document into one of these and say, give me, the 10 most important points or whatever. And it'll do a great job.
Oh, I don't think I haven't. I do that all the time.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, why would
TLDR this for me?
It's so good at it, or like rewrite this or explain this concept from, in a simpler way or whatever. And it's like, oh, well, that's, you want the average then. I mean, why wouldn't you want the average?
Mm-hmm.
There are people using it right now for, in the visual effects industry. So here's kind of a fun use case. So you got the green screen behind you, right? Your brain can tell when like something is semi-transparent. You can tell what its color it's supposed to be, even though the actual thing you're seeing is green. But you're like, oh, that's clear.
Inference. Yeah.
Right. You can tell that it's clear mentally, but then trying to like cut it out using a normal two-dimensional tool is extremely difficult. And just saying delete green means that like that glass of water now is blank when really it should be sort of refracted and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so it's like, hey, vision, what if we got the average vision to be able to cut this out for you? And it turns out it can do that really well. And it's like that is going to change the way they do compositing in Hollywood, like as we speak. That's happening right now. I've seen demonstrations of it. It looks very good. It's like, it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect, but it's like the amount of human intervention to clean it up is going to go from like hundreds of hours down to a few hours. So incredible. So there's a lot of times where you want the average, but there's lots of times when you really don't, And I think when people are talking about it as though it's like, oh, it's going to come up with new things. It's like, you should ask AI sometime to come up with new things and see what it does.
But they're not. I think just to press pause there, I think the disconnect between sometimes the way you explain things, and I'm not challenging your underlying assumption. I'm just to maybe peel that a minute. I think that the biggest advantage that AI has on, say, humans is that it can retain in a precise fashion a massive context window. We can retain a lot of knowledge, but it's our recollection of that knowledge which is imperfect, right?
Sure.
And raw intelligence a lot of times is mapped as like your ability to observe patterns. Like, so the more patterns you see patterns that other people didn't see, and then that, sometimes you look crazy, but sometimes you come up with something really amazing, right? So AI, because just of the nature of itself, if you have a huge body of data and you have a massive context window and you point it towards a particular, chunk of data and say, hey, find me some new patterns here. Here's all the known patterns. What are some patterns we missed? Then it absolutely is going to come up with new things. I mean, just by default, we'll come up with new things. Some of it may be hallucinated or whatever, but like in general, like that, and those new patterns are going to be the basis for new vaccines, new solutions, new approaches, new whatever, because of the previously before unseen patterns that were always there. Yes?
Yeah, depending on how it's trained and stuff, right? But that's not, I think that's one of the hard parts when you're talking about like AI, is that there's AI like that, or AI like the green screen detection stuff. And then the other thing, which is people in a text interface of some kind. And then there's like back and forth using human language of some kind.
Right.
Right. And that is the one that everyone feels like is like, it's so good, and I don't know, I'll ask this and it will give me the answer. And then I wind up feeling like I have this superpower now. I have access to this thing. It's like what I really try to get people to do is like, think of it mythologically. Like, you're going to go consult something. What are you consulting? Are you consulting the Oracle of Delphi? Like this window into the gods? Are you consulting like the library?
I'm consulting my holy book that has all of God's words written on the page.
Right. Some people kind of treat it like that. But
that's right.
So that's what I tell people is like,
it's certainly as useful as that is.
Yeah. You're going to go consult the great average. The great average, and see what the great average has to say. And like here's a really funny example for you. So let's say so I was going to use it to make some test questions. So I pull up, I'm going to make some questions for logic. So I'm like, okay, what's a good fallacy? Ad hominem fallacy. Give me 5 examples of ad hominem fallacy. And I asked 5 different AIs this, and they all gave strangely similar answers for all 5. It was just like,
because these are the top 5 ad hominem fallacies that have ever been used.
They're the most average.
Right.
The most average. So it's like, if I really wanted to do that for test generation, what I should do is ask for 50 and then look at the last 10.
Or 172.
Yeah. Give me 200 of them and just crank it out. And it's like,
that last subset is the one you're looking for, right?
Yeah. Halfway down the list, it finally will have exhausted the ones involving environmentalism and women's rights. And then eventually you'd get down to the ones that are actually interesting, because it's like, well, that's what it cares about the most, because Reddit does. And so what's the most important thing? Environmentalism and women's rights. Like, it's important, but it's not that important. It's not the most important thing ever,
So ultimately, I get all that. So ultimately you're saying, because you are suspicious about AI's ability to come up with new things, where I'm defining new things not as like new creative ideas. I feel like new creative ideas is stuff, even humans don't know how they get this stuff, and there's all kinds of books that have been written.
A flash of insight.
That's exactly right. And it's like, is that actually generated from your subconscious, or is that a signal that you're receiving from the ether? Is that whatever? I mean, we still don't even know how your own consciousness works. So forgetting all that, typically like creative spark, and whether you read books or you watch movies or whatever, even if you're not a creative person, you've seen other people be creative, and it almost always is depicted as, it's like, right? It's some flash of new creative stuff. Oh, what if we imagine this, right? I agree with you that AI will probably always lag behind in that area. I would like to believe that anyway. But with the existing data that we do have, usually the problems are, so like, for example, in my business, right? I have a business, on a scale from one being absolute failure to 100 blowing away every expectation and performing at an absolute precision, 100% efficiency, right? I'm probably somewhere around 30, right? Even if you're good, you even somebody who's excellent, right, and is really on top of it with great processes, even they usually, if they're honest, would admit they're probably only at 60-70% of where, that would be ambitious, right? There's always that 30-40% delta that it's undefined, or you don't have enough bandwidth to pursue it, right? So that's where, AI would be fantastic at that, because it already understands, like, here's what a successful business needs. Let's subset that down. You have an insurance business. Oh, you have independent agents. Oh, you are straight commit, whatever the case may be. And it's like, okay, here's all the best practice of all these great companies that have come and gone before, all the business books that have ever been written. And then here, pointed at here's my financials, here's my cash flow statement, here's this, here's that, here, blah, blah, blah. And it's going to find all kinds of patterns that either I'm not aware of, and it's going to give me definitive action steps that I can take to amp up. So that, to me, it's like, well, so if you point it at, like, say, what we've been able to do with mapping of the genome, or any other data sets like that, like say in either let's say weapons technology or chemistry or any of these different things that like we've discovered what we've discovered, but there's a whole universe of stuff that we have yet to discover, but yet the raw data is there. It's just waiting to be discovered. Why would AI not be able to be pointed at that? Yeah.
Yeah, potentially. The funny thing is that because it is like the great average, you wind up with like weird pockets. So I think it was, I'm trying to remember who did this study. This is pretty recent, where they fed I think Gemini, Claude, and one of the GPT models. They fed it like these business scenarios, and they applied Harvard Business Review kind of stuff. And they found that every single time it always recommended certain courses of action. And the thing is that some of them we know from, because these are historical ones, we know that those were the wrong course. But it was like every single time it's like, well, you have to diversify. Every single time you need to do this. Every single time you need to do this. Like collaboration always, diversification always.
That sounds more ideologically based answer than a evidence-based answer.
Right. But the thing is that that's what's in the training data. And so as a result, when it looks at your data that you bring in, it's like, oh, I already know the answer to this. It's right in the training data. Like this is what you wanted. And so you're going to wind up, and this is something that I think, I was talking to some of the guys at the business school actually about this. I think we're going to start seeing a wave of people that are pretty sure that because they've bought into the hype or whatever, that AI is the genius, and that they can trust, like, hey, I'm not there. I pulled up ChatGPT the other night, and I asked it what we should do next in the business, and it said this, and gosh darn it, that's what we're going to do. And so like these little mini CEOs, these founders, whatever, they're all taking the same advice, which means if we ask what the advice it's giving, it's going to give us the same advice, which that's exploitable, right? I mean, that's something that's like, oh, well, now I can kind of predict where there's going to be this shift in the market because, a decent chunk of
either
people,
you can go there first or you can go the different direction. That's interesting.
Or sell to these people the thing that ChatGPT is going to tell them they need. Let us provide.
Yeah, I'm a provider.
So anyway,
I'll provide that for you.
Yeah. So I think it just depends, right? Like if we're talking about, are there going to be signals in large data sets that we won't be able to find because of the way human attention works, and that the machine will be able to find? Absolutely. And it's like, I'm really curious to see what kind of things are discovered from there. I think on the other hand, if you're saying, what makes for a good business idea is judgment, like having good judgment and knowing how this will probably work. And most of the biggest models were unable to answer the car wash question, which is, I think, are you familiar with this? Oh, so remember how back in like about a year and a half, 2 years ago, the thing to ask was how many R's are in the word strawberry?
Okay.
And a lot of them would just get very confused. They're like, 6, like there's only 1 R. It's like, well, count them for me. It's like, here they are. Count, 1. So the new one, which I think is absolutely hilarious, is this. So now you can't use it anymore because it has now become part of the training data. But from like 6 months ago, you could ask, I need to wash my car. The car wash is 100 feet away. Should I walk or drive? And the correct answer is.
You're asking me?
Yeah. What do you think?
I need to wash my car. The car wash is 100 feet away. Should I walk or drive?
Should I walk or drive?
Obviously, you can't wash your car if you don't drive it over there.
Yeah. Well, you and I know that. They don't. So you'd have Claude Opus 4.5 be like, well, look, 100 feet is really close, and there's a lot of wear and tear on the engine. Think about the amount of hydrocarbons being spewed into the atmosphere. Plus, a small amount of light exercise is very healthy for your heart.
So what's the follow-up question?
So
once I get there, you make a lot of sense. So I'm going to walk there, and I want just planning this out. Once I walk there, how do I wash my car? Oh, well, that's easy. Yeah. Pull your car into a bay and Right. But did I carry my car here, or how did this happen? Yeah. How do I have my car?
So this is the thing, is that there's a few AI models that figured it out. And so Kimmy's one of them. It was like, well, since you need to watch the car, it doesn't make any sense to be there without it. So you better drive it. It's like, I think it was a Grok 420, which is also, it's kind of spicy.
Yeah.
Sometimes its answer is like, unless you're planning to push the car, you should probably drive it there. Thank you. But almost, it was like 2 or 3 models of the big ones were able to figure this out. The rest of them were just like, gave you a bunch of environmentalist nonsense about how, you shouldn't drive to save the environment, you should walk. And it's just like, what? And it's like, how much good judgment do these things have? It's like, well, they don't have any.
Right.
Like, they don't have any. They're giving you the average of their training data, which, you're just sort of at the mercy of whatever's in there, good and bad. And if they left stuff out because they didn't think it would need to be trained in,
That's
you wouldn't
interesting.
get it.
Wow.
So
That's interesting. Okay. So in other words, your verdict on that particular video anyway is not conclusive.
yeah, I've started to push back a lot on people talking about what AI will soon be able to do. It's like, yeah, you don't know that. You don't know that soon it'll be able to do anything. So unless you want to talk about what it can do today, I kind of don't care.
Soon,
like,
oil will be too expensive to burn and generate electricity, and AI will be able to do nothing. So that's
yeah,
that's
true. Well, no, you put them in space.
There you
The
go,
data
yeah,
centers in
solar-
space,
solar
power.
Yeah.
Did you hear that Meta was thinking about putting satellites to focus sunlight down into a set of? So it's a different way to do solar
Smart.
power. Instead of using a voltaic cell to turn the sunlight into electricity, you heat up something which then spins a turbine. So like the rest of the power plant looks the same. It's just, what's your source of heat? It could be a nuclear reactor, it could be coal, it could be whatever. Well, this one is just going to be this lens up in
Reminds me
space.
that. Reminds me that. What am I thinking of right now?
It's like the magnifying glass
Sure.
and cooking the ants. It's like
There's a movie where they it's a James Bond movie, Pierce Brosnan, and they have Icarus is the name of the satellite. They have a satellite that can unfold, grab the sun rays, and then focus like a magnifying. This is exactly, but it's a super weapon because they can put that laser anywhere on Earth and blow things up, right? Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, I need to watch that again.
I always knew
like,
Zuckerberg
I feel
was
like
a Bond
that James
villain.
Bond movie was not one of the best. But
The world is.
I think
not
that's the
enough,
one. I
Mr.
think that's the
Bond.
one. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think that's it. It's the one where they have the ice hotel and Halle Berry, and then the Icarus is like melts the entire hotel, and they're trying to drive the super BMW out of the parking garage that's made of ice and everything's melted. You don't remember? Anyway.
Yeah,
Okay, so
I didn't care much for the Brosnan ones. So.
yeah, it's unfortunate. Do you know that he was actually useless trivia? He was actually asked to be Bond, approached to be Bond, years prior to that. Shortly after Moore, I want to say retired, or right at the end of Moore's tenure, they had approached Brosnan. They thought he would be great, but he was under contract to Remington Steele, and Remington Steele would not release him. They were like, no, because they had a hit show on their hands. And they're like, absolutely not, And so, and he was super bitter about it. But then when he finally got the chance to do it, it was like, the first one was good. The GoldenEye was great, I thought. But
GoldenEye was great, yeah.
That Russian chick's super hot too. Not the villain one, but the nice
There's
one.
just it's one of the fun parts about Bond is you always have like the silly Bonds, like Moonraker. Like, what was that?
Culturally relevant at the time, though. Yeah,
in space.
Yeah, we just got to the moon,
Lasers.
Oh man, so I think the new Bond is supposed to be. Who did I see they're going to do?
Have they picked?
I feel like
I thought they were still.
Let's see here. Who is the new Bond? Oh no, it's not confirmed. Oh, okay.
I had heard for a bit that Idris Elba was in talks, which I thought would have been really good. He has like the stature for it. I think he has the
He's British.
physicality. Definitely has like the voice.
Yep.
He's British. Yeah, I think it would have been a good choice. Someone asked him about it in an interview, and he said that he feels like he's too old
Well, he
for
is.
the role. But but like if it had been 15 years before, absolutely, he would.
Even though black don't crack, so it's like, hey, you can pull it off.
He's a very well preserved.
Very well preserved. He was a great villain in the Star Trek Beyond. I thought that was terrific. I mean, you didn't know it was him until the movie was over, but but it was like, oh, he was really good. The dude in the can't remember what happened to him, but yeah. Okay, so moving on to our topic of the day, religion. Okay, so
yes,
I think what generated this conversation was I had sent you this article from a pastor. So this guy. Former pastor. He's a former megachurch pastor, and he has a blog. I think it's called Deconstructing, Dechristianizing Christianity, something like that. I don't know what it is, but it's basically he got his journey started when he got disillusioned with the incentive structure around being a megachurch pastor, right? So like and I think a lot of these people.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just to give the proper shout out, it is Jim Palmer. And this blog is called Deconstructionology.
Deconstructionology. There you go. And so his
Deconstructionology.
And pardon me, Jim, if you're watching this podcast later and you're like, no, that guys didn't. We'd love to have you on and have a discussion about this. But the way I understood his story is, after being a successful megachurch pastor for a while, he began to get really uncomfortable with the incentive structure, which was all around basically like, growing your church, right? So how do we grow at all costs, right? And it's just like here's a company that has a great product, whatever it is, and ultimately, once it's a public company, the fiduciary duty of the shareholder and everything else is maximize shareholder value. And sometimes you maximize shareholder value to the actual detriment of the product that you're creating and everything else. And so,
the people that work there, everything. And the town that it sits in, and
right?
everything.
And so, in fact, well, anyway, that's an aside, but. So he got ADD. Sorry, he got disillusioned with that incentive structure, and he correctly identified it as an incentive structure first of all, and then tried to like uncouple from it. But the more he tried to uncouple from it, the more pushback he got from even his own members, his deacon board, all this other stuff, and he just started realizing like, I mean, is this even is the version of Christianity? Is Christianity itself? Is it actually following the teachings of Christ at all? Mm-hmm. And as he started to kind of like really dig into that, I think that's where a lot of his other ideas have come from. So just to kind of set the stage. Yeah. And so anyway, I sent you the article, one of the ones that I thought was one of the more thought-provoking articles, and just say, hey, what do you think of this guy? And in your response, I think about halfway through the article was like, oh man, this is all AI or whatever. And so, okay, so just break down your 2 cents there, and then we can discuss.
Well, so I really like the way you kind of open the discussion, because I think there's sort of a genre of writing, and they're called deconstruction narratives. So I know deconstruction means something really specific within like literary circles, philosophy circles. It means something different in the evangelical world. So it means basically people who have become like so disillusioned with primarily evangelicalism that they feel like they have to sort of pull at the strings of the
unravel
sweater until it's all gone, right? It's basically the way it works. And so a lot of people, when they do these deconstruction narratives, a lot of them wind up with like just sort of pure atheism, like there is no God, like this is all a scam. This is meant, religion is meant to like keep people down, and and I'm gay, and you're like, all right, like good for you, and so it's like there's that version, and then you've got other versions that become like a much more minimalistic or ascetic version of Christianity. Like Christianity is all about self-denial, and so looking at the evangelical world with the bless your hearts and the rhinestone Bible covers, and quoting random scriptures in order to explain why you always vote Republican, that kind of stuff. It's like, what the heck, like, no, like, Christianity is all about self-denial. We need to basically become like monks, give away your possessions. And if not, I don't want to have anything to do with you, kind of thing. And then you've got another version, which his one is part of, that is kind of like, there's still a real Christianity out there to find, but it is radically different from, say, the theology you might read out of Thomas Aquinas or Martin Luther, or, anybody from church history. Like, somehow or another, Christianity got hijacked. And so then it's a question of like, well, when and who did it, and what direction. So it's like, instead of this one thing that would have made Christianity beautiful and wholesome, instead it got hijacked by insert villain here. And so it went this other way. And that's the thing that I'm rejecting. And so like, that's the version that he's giving. And I thought that the nice part about this article, I mean, yes, it's AI.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he used AI to polish up his writing, but like, do you think it was completely generated by AI, or you don't think any of those are his thoughts?
No. So, okay. So, I have two thoughts about this. One, I want to save to the end.
Yeah. Do it your way.
Just because it's not nice. It's not a nice thing to say. The other one, though, is that it definitely was rewritten by AI. So I don't know if it's like he had his outline. He's like, here, turn this into an article. And then, I agree with all that. This is what I wanted to say. Here you go. So that's
revise this paragraph.
Possible.
You
but
completely went off. This is.
Right. But like, the prose itself was generated by AI. That's pretty clear. But that's fine. Like, I assume.
Just since we started the conversation talking about AI, what was the clue that clued you in to that?
Oh, so I've just seen so much AI generated writing in my line of work that you just it just has the
taste,
the smell, I guess. Yeah. You're just like, oh, like a lot of the sentence constructions that involve things like, it's not this, it's that. The way that it sets up a series, a very specific AI method of doing that. The punctuation, AI tends to favor certain types of punctuation. And there's also kind of a generalness to it as well. And so this is one of those things about consulting the great average, is you wind up with a lot of times like very, very abstract-y kind of words. Like they're like very vague sentences sometimes. And there's a lot of those in there where, like, if I was the copy editor, I'd be like, what exactly do you mean by this sentence? And then you would say, oh, I mean this and this. It's like, well, then you should say that instead of this, because this is just sort of like bland, So little things like that. I'm not too worked up about.
So that's a margin note. So anyway, continue with your main thought.
Yeah. So what I liked about it was that instead of just being like, Christianity bad or evangelicalism is almost always aimed at evangelicalism.
Well, and for sure he is. Like, he doesn't say that, but I mean, mega church is an evangelical phenomenon. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, but I'm saying like a deconstruction narratives.
Tend to be evangelical.
Tend to be about evangelicals.
That may tell you something. Yeah.
It might. Yeah. But it's not like you have a whole bunch of people that are leaving
Presbyterian church,
Greek.
Right.
Yeah. The Coptic Orthodox church. They're like, it was all a scam. It's like, no, they'll say like, I don't believe that anymore, but they don't say that stuff,
Yeah, the Pope and I just have to part company on this one, Yeah.
It's like, hey, that's called the Reformation. You should become a Presbyterian.
Yeah, but I just have some problems with these other things that Presbyterians do. So picking out,
Baptist. We'll find one for you. Don't worry.
Baptist, I think Baptist too, and I mean maybe I'm biased. I probably am because we grew up Baptist, but if you said Anabaptist, I would say I'm open-minded. If you say American Baptist, I'm like Southern Baptist, Convention
like
Baptist.
I
don't know. Yeah.
It's like Anabaptist. So you mean I get to wear a big beard, drink beer, and then like break into a church when a baptism is going on, when they're baptizing a baby, and shout out, "Don't baptize the baby!" Get hauled out by police. It's like, is that what I get to do? Because
Anabaptists don't believe in waterboarding infants. That's just not something we do. Yeah,
we don't. He can't consent. You're baptizing him into Satan. Right? That's what they said. Anyway, so I like that what he did was not just be like, hey, here's where it's gone wrong, but he offered something else. Just as kind of a snippet at the end, like, here's what I think the message of Jesus really is. And he gave us short things. So I really like that. I think it's much harder to create than to destroy. And so I appreciated that about it. I like that you passed this article in. The part that I got kind of raised the eyebrows. I was like, wait, what? You know, like when you watch the movie, From Dusk Till Dawn, you know, and then it's like, oh, it's a heist movie. They're getting away. And then it's like,
wait,
you know, I don't want to spoil it if someone hasn't seen this movie.
It's now
like,
I think 30
what?
years now.
Wait.
Vampires.
Yeah. You're like, wait, that's the movie. We're doing that movie. Okay. You know, like we're surviving the vampire apocalypse. So I kind of had that feeling when he sort of revealed who the villain was, and when Christianity was hijacked. And it was hijacked so early that all the people who would have been able to maintain Jesus's message and the ones that wrote the stuff that you're now referring back to say that it contains Jesus' message.
All of that is tainted.
All of them. Yeah, that early. And it was tainted by someone who was an outsider to that group and could have very easily been rejected by everyone if he had been wrong. And that would be St. Paul. And I thought that was one of the most. So I've heard this kind of thing before.
I think I sent you,
but it's almost
sent you a couple of videos actually of different people calling in Paul's. Well, and actually,
like Paul is the villain somehow, or Paul hijacked.
Well, the first time I was ever even exposed to that idea was, I want to say I was maybe 20. No, I was in high school because I watched The Last Temptation of Christ, and
great film.
And Scorsese basically uses that. And I'm sure he didn't come up with it, but borrowed from somebody. But that scene at the end when Jesus is going through his temptation and has this vision of himself, you know, coming off the cross, living a normal life, having kids, having kids, being married, living, you know, a carpenter's life and being happy. And hearing Paul preaching the crucified Christ, the crucified and risen Christ, and literally confronting him and saying, dude, that never happened. I mean, I am Jesus. I got off the cross. That never happened. And then Paul's like, at first is like, well, how do you know it didn't happen? You know, and he's like, because I'm Jesus and I never did that, you know? And after they talk for a minute, Paul goes, I'm really glad I met you. I don't need you. By all means, go live your life. I don't need you though. I got something else going on. And I thought that was like, wow, that's a fascinating take. And yeah, so he has that. He basically takes that tack. Yeah.
So the interesting thing about the Scorsese film, and I confess I had not read the book that it's based on, but at least the way I remember it presented in the film was that this is part of the thing. So eventually, and again, 30 years, we can spoil it. Yeah. So eventually he is convinced to stay, right? Like he's tempted at the end to not go through with the redemption of mankind, but is convinced in the process of these visions to stay. And you have like the way the Holy Spirit comes to him as like a headache, and like a migraine kind of thing. And sort of prevented from doing certain things. Well, so that statement by Paul is part of the convincing of him that like, look, your ministry means nothing without this final step. And so it's like, oh, well, Paul in this case is right. Like he's the ministry of Jesus is incoherent without the death and resurrection. Right. And so, Jesus finally is like rejects the temptation and stays. So I thought it was actually very positive towards Pauline theology here, you know.
Well,
in terms of the movie.
I did too. In terms of the movie, and I remember watching because there was so much controversy when that movie came out, and I was a few years younger when my early teens, I think, when it came out, and then people were talking about how crazy it was, and you know, it's satanic.
People tried to ban it.
They tried to ban it, and then so of course I had to watch it.
Yeah, and forbidden movie.
Forbidden. I'm in. You know,
Yeah, same here. I was like, I want to see what people are mad about, and I was like, wow, this was actually like really encouraging and like a beautiful film. Like, I don't, what's the problem, you know? Like, okay, you know, it's a very Christ from below, like emphasizing the humanity of Jesus, but that's consistent with the creed, so I don't see a problem. But
I just looked it up, 1988. So I was, I want to say 13.
You're 13, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this is the part about it that was, I think you'd have a better case with something later, like if you said Constantine screwed it up, or even if you went really later and said it was like the connection with Aristotle that comes out of the scholastics. We never got rid of that, and so we have this sort of Greekified, you know.
Well, in many ways, I think that's accurate. That we do have a Renaissance understanding of Christianity. You know,
so
especially in the West. West, we're talking about Protestantism itself.
Yeah,
it didn't come from. Obviously, there's a Reformation, but like, but those ideas really became solidified and calcified during the Renaissance. You know.
Yeah, so this, by the way, this is Nietzsche's argument. So I mean, it's like, yeah, there's a lot there you could dig up. I mean, I personally don't subscribe to it, but I can see how that would happen. Or then if you went a lot later and if you said, well, the real issue was, I mean, you could go very late. You could say like the real issue was like the moral majority movement in the 60s and 70s, and that is where you start to see these mega churches become like sort of connected with politics and influence, and it starts to look maybe like anti-Christian at that point or something. I could kind of go with any of those as being reasonable villains. I mean, you might agree or disagree, but it's like, okay, I can follow the plot line of that story. St. Paul is really hard for me because he converts, and he would have, if this is true, he would have had to have converted to Christianity and then changed Christianity from within while the apostles are still alive, and at the same time subverting their message while collaborating with them. And they seem to have like friendly collaboration even within the letters. And then you look at the stuff in Paul and you compare it to the Gospels. And I'm not talking about like the Beatitudes. I'm talking about the whole thing.
Well, that's because we don't have the minutes of all the private meetings where they had the knockdown, drag out fights, you know, and the back rooms, you know. Yeah. Oh, well, pardon me, in the upper room or wherever they were having the meetings.
But like, but for example, like a lot of the really big changes that happen within Christianity very early, like say the opening up of the gospel to the Gentiles, that's Peter's responsibility there. And
but
also
after he had a confrontation with Paul about it.
No. So this is before that, like the
vision with the
with Cornelius
coming down.
That's before. That's before Paul.
That's before Paul converted.
That's before Paul converts.
So
the opening of to the Gentiles happens before Paul even gets started. And then stuff like the Eucharist is in the Gospels, and also it's not just in Paul's letters. A lot of the stuff we have for the end times is from Johannine tradition. Like it's not like if you pulled Paul out, like if you imagined a Bible that didn't include Paul, I'm not sure, like you would miss all these treatises where things are laid out like step by step. And so there'd be more kind of reconstructing work to do.
Not to correct you, but again, this is according to Perplexity, but it says early Christians initially focused on Jewish converts after Jesus' death around 30 to 33 AD, with limited outreach to Gentiles. Before Paul's conversion around 33 to 36. So he was very early, within the first 3 or 4 years, I guess. Hellenistic Jewish Christians like Stephen began preaching to Gentiles attracted to Judaism in places like Antioch. But this was not widespread. So Peter's vision and ministry to Cornelius in Acts 10 marked an early step, but likely post Paul's conversion, whilst Paul's work systematized and expanded this. And then the Jerusalem Council, which was 49 AD, later formalized that. So
remember, though, Stephen is martyred under Paul.
Under Paul, that's correct.
Right. So this Hellenized Jewish pathway is pre-Paul's conversion, right? So
yes,
that's
with that one person at least documented.
Yeah.
We can extrapolate, but documented, that's the one person. Yeah,
sure. So
and we don't know whether Peter. We don't have anything saying whether Peter was on board with Stephen's deal or not. Or do
right. But what my point though is that, okay, even if you say, hey, look, Paul was the one that started it. Okay, we get to the Jerusalem Council, all the apostles are still alive. They're talking about
AD 49. So you're talking about 15, 16 years after Christ's ascension, let's say.
Yeah.
But that's described in Acts 15. So anything before Acts 15 would have been prior to that.
Sure. My point though is that once you get there, it's not like this is 100 years later.
Right.
Paul is kind of wheeling and dealing in the back rooms, and none of the originals are around to defend Jesus' original mission. Right. Like, it's like, no, everyone's still around. And
but I think the core
James is more or less in charge of things. And
the core question to in my mind, and again, not and we're just using the article as kind of a springboard for the discussion, right? So in my mind, even at the Jerusalem Council, right? Like, what were the early? We call them Christians now because that's what the Romans called them.
Followers of
ridicule them. Yeah. So before that, did they think of themselves as anything other than converted Jews, right? Like, and not even converted, right? It's like, hey, we're Jews. We follow because here's God. God chose the state of the people of Israel as his chosen people. Jesus certainly sees himself as a Jew and as an outgrowth of Judaism. So he's not like there to say we need to tear Judaism down, or hey, I brought a new religion. He never says anything like that. It's just, hey, you guys are, the way you guys are interpreting what has been given to you is from this angle. And what I'm saying is, look at it from this angle instead. Yeah. Is literally pretty much his whole message is, look, God created this system for you, didn't create you to follow this system. These aren't real rules. Like, in fact, if you want to break down all of the law, the Torah, everything that's ever been given, the 10 Commandments and everything else, is basically only two things God really cares about. And that is, number one, that you love him with all your heart. And number two, that you love your neighbor as yourself. If you do those two things, that is the law and the prophet. Like, that's his whole message, is you've built up, because men, that's what we like to do, is we like to create systems. We like to create models. We like to create, mechanisms, and that's fine. But as you create those things and those structures, you've lost what the idea of the whole thing really is. And what the whole thing really is about loving God, loving people. And so, and that's it. And so, to me, that's the way I read what he said. And I'm not saying that's true or not. I'm just saying that's the way I read what he said. So if those early followers of Christ, let's not use Christian even, the early followers of Christ, did they think of themselves as Christians or whatever? Or did they think of themselves as, hey, we're following God as we understand it through Judaism and through our great teacher, right? Who died and was resurrected for us, right? All these different formulas of, I think he even goes into it in that article, Calvinistic, he doesn't say Calvin by name, but he's talking about that whole idea of like, hey, everybody's born with this sin nature and we had to pay this penalty, and all these different things that the, let's say, Protestant church and Catholics and everybody else has put together, that, you have this problem, and we have the key to remove the problem. And so here's the key, take the key, turn the lock, and problem solved, right? And that whole mechanism, was that something that actually Jesus was even teaching? Because it doesn't, if you read even what the gospel writers wrote that he said, he never says anything remotely close to that, in fact, it's anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's there's a lot of ways in which I'm very sympathetic to like the deconstruction, path, whatever, right? I don't know what to call it, right? Because everyone seems to kind of do it a little differently. But
just say deconstruction. You're sympathetic to the idea of deconstruction.
Yeah, especially so. Like, if you read through the Gospels and you're like, okay, let me just read what it says, right? And let's go through like the Gospel of John. You have this figure who is sort of this cosmic figure, right? I mean, the Word that becomes flesh, and his light shines out in the darkness, and we beheld him.
Very mystical,
sort of like
very mystical. Yeah,
very hidden from everyone else because their eyes were darkened by sin and so on. And then he comes and he keeps talking about how God is trying to gather people to himself. He's wanting to reach out and find us and pull us close to him, and that we've been resisting in a way, and that like he's keeps trying to help people try to open their eyes.
Right. If we build this scaffolding, that if we ascend it, we delude ourselves into thinking that we have become right with God or made right with God, and actually the scaffolding is irrelevant. All of that.
Because God's trying to get us. He wants to come. He's coming to find us, and Jesus seems to be very, very bothered by people that are using religion for their own profit. He's very bothered by religious hypocrisy. He doesn't seem to be all that worried about political issues. It doesn't seem to be his thing. So like if you were just kind of putting together like what is this guy talking about?
What was Jesus about? Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But you do have these things like the raising of Lazarus, where he says, like, I am the resurrection and the life, and the one who believes in me will never die, and the one who believes and dies will live again. And it's just, you're kind of like, whoa, like we get this sort of cosmic story. Like I don't think you could read through the Gospels and think of Jesus as like a very kind moral teacher that wished to help, and people enlighten themselves. I mean, there's this thing where his message really is also about himself and like how powerful a figure he is. And also the gospel writers seem to be very impressed, especially whoever writes Mark. So it's sort of the Peter's tradition, seem very impressed with Jesus's ability to command evil spirits. Very impressed. And that like this is the calling card. Like if you wanted to describe Jesus from the Gospel of Mark, he's an itinerant exorcist. Right. And people that have demon possessed throw themselves at his feet and beg him not to be sent into the abyss and destroyed. Well, it's like, what? One of the things, I mean, whoa, right? So
one of the things that Palmer talks about in his article is, which I appreciated, because to me the whole idea that you were talking earlier about hijacking and all this other kind of stuff, Palmer doesn't frame it that way. A lot of people have framed it that way, but Palmer doesn't. He's more like, look, Paul is ultimately every writer in the Bible, we can agree, were human beings. They were human beings of a particular time and of a particular context. So they were, if you drop one of the things about human beings are like right now we are white men born in America at this time, and so we're Americans. We see the world as American, even if we've trained ourselves to decouple from Americanism and try to view things through a different prism. It's still we're seeing through the American prism, our deconstruction of that prism, and whatever new thing, so you whatever you're looking at is bent, refracted, let's say, through the prism that you look at it. And so he kind of makes that case for Paul. He's like, look, Paul, growing up as a Jew, as an observant Jew, as a Pharisee for many years, is exposed to these new ideas, exposed to the presence of God, exposed to Christ, exposed to his teachings, and pivots to being a follower of Christ, whatever you want to call that, right? We would say, modern Christians would say conversion, but did Paul see it as conversion? Like, does he even use that word?
It's painful to kick against the goads.
Right. And so he just is like, look, this. Why are you
resisting?
Right. I've been a salmon swimming upstream. Let's just go with the current here instead. And so all of the things that he later then discusses in the letters that he wrote and in all the conversations that he would have ever had would have been colored by his own understanding of how he grew up and where, right. And so, as was the case with all of the apostles.
Yeah. So I think if we have to be careful about, I don't think the Christian view of inspiration requires something like God dictating the book. Paul wrote them, or some of them are like Paul with a few of his close friends are writing it together, because he'll sign it Paul and this person.
But modern Christians, and again, I don't want to disparage anybody who sees themselves as a modern Christian and does not share this viewpoint. I'm just saying, like, in general, if you go to and I can only speak for evangelicalism and maybe more narrowly, maybe the Baptist interpretation of evangelicalism, just from the way that I grew up, but and then some later limited exposure to Episcopalianism, which is what I am officially now. But ultimately,
you and me both. It's an Episcopalian podcast.
Episcopalians, man. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see if they accept that one. But like I don't know that like a modern Christian view of the Bible is that no, it is the Word of God. It's 100% inspired. We have relatives. Even I get one of our aunts, will send me long emails about the different things that she's discovering, reading the Bible, and she believes like, hey, no, these words, this is what this means, and this is what this means to me, and da da da. And I think that's great. Like she's trying to discover what God has for her, and she's looking at this source to try to divine those answers, And so she reads something that was written to different people a long time ago, and then makes that apply to herself. And maybe that's correct, maybe that's incorrect, maybe it's whatever, but it's maybe it's useful, maybe it's not useful, maybe it's congruent with God's will, or maybe it's not, or whatever the case may be. But that's what people do. And so when people say like, hey, it says the Word of God is God breathed and inspired and infallible and inerrant and all that stuff. And it's like, anytime you see that in the Bible, well, that's written typically in the New Testament. They're not referring to what they're writing. They're referring to the Old Testament.
They're referring to like the book of Isaiah.
Correct. They're not referring to what we call, Western Christians call the Bible being the 66 book. And even those 66 books were up for debate for a long time. So for hundreds of years, and even when they were finally codified, there were political reasons that the people that codified it wanted it codified that way. So like it's very difficult for me personally, like to look at the Bible, let's say, and say, yeah, do I believe that this is God's word? I believe God had something to do with a lot of it being in there. I don't know that I think it's inerrant and infallible and all the other things because that's not. Well, I don't see how that makes any sense given the current published Bible you would pull off a bookshelf and buy.
So look, here's I think.
I lost your signal, buddy. I don't know if that's on my end or on your end. I wish we had somebody in the chat who could say, I think it's you. You're spinning right now. Oh, and he's gone. Well, he's back. Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome back, buddy.
I just refreshed my thing. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. You were about to comment on what I said about the Bible.
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that I think helps me when I read through or listen to deconstruction narratives is thinking about like, okay, what exactly, like, where does Christian doctrine come from? And the point of it is like, it should come from Jesus, right? That's step one. And then after that, you get the apostles' teaching. And so if you look at what's going on in the New Testament, like, they'll say, oh, the believers, they gathered together, they would break bread, they would share what they had in common, and they would devote themselves to the apostles' teaching. Like, that's a phrase that's used kind of regularly. So if you think about the books of the New Testament as the best approximation we have to the apostles' teaching, in that some of them were written by apostles or by people very, very close to them. And so it's like, oh, well, that's what we're doing. We're doing the same thing. We're devoting ourselves to the apostles' teaching. And here is the record that we have, the closest record that we have of what that is.
Well, the accepted record that has not previously been deemed heretical.
Right. So here's kind of a funny point. I was in Augustine's book on Christian doctrine. There's a section, it's kind of like an FAQ. It's like, how long should sermons be? Well, that's one of the things that questions that he responds to is, and this is written before the canon is finalized. But one of the questions is, what books should I preach out of? It's like, well, this is a very good question. If you can't just say like the Bible, So it's like, what book should I preach out of? And so his response says, well, you could preach out of whatever you want, but if you take a look at the biggest and most important churches, and you look at the books that they preach out of, if you stick to those, you'll be okay. And it's like, and here's a list of what pretty much everybody uses. And he just rattles off cold the 27 books of the New Testament. And this is, again, pre-canon. And he presents it as just like an FAQ answer. Like, if you're wondering which books to use, these are the ones that everybody considers to be reliable. And then if you take a look, even before that, you have a lot of early church fathers where there's no even pretense of having a canon.
Man, I lost you again, buddy. I'd like to say that's you and not me, but I mean, hey, it could be me. But I don't know. If you're
back?
Yeah, you're back. What you got going on over there, bud?
I don't know. I'm on Wi-Fi. My Wi-Fi has decided to betray me when I need it the most.
Jank around you. Yeah.
But anyway, so like he presents it as like, well, this is just normal, is what everyone knows. And you have all these quotes from people from, very early on where they're quoting freely from books of
Man, you're gonna have to plug into
sure about
hard
where
line
it
or
came
something
from, like the book of Hebrews.
You're gonna have to plug into a hard line. I lost everything you just said.
Am I still dropping real bad? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you now. Just go closer to your router or something. Pick up and relocate yourself. It's far too interesting of a conversation to leave like this.
Am I on now? Is this okay?
You're on now.
Okay.
Yeah, you're on now.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see if it holds.
Okay.
Anyway, point is just that like that it's not like nobody.
I just lost you again. Damn.
I'm switching. Okay. I'm switching computers.
I feel like the devil, man. It's the devil. He doesn't want us to have this conversation. So for those of you guys that are tuning in and watching, Russell and I sometimes we get into religious conversations, and I sent him a copy of this article I just recently read about a former megachurch pastor who was kind of deconstructing his faith a little bit. Like, I mean, is this really the right path? Are we as Christians even following what Christ even was talking about and was about in his ministry? And so that's kind of the basis of the conversation. So hopefully that interests you a little bit. You can hang with us. He'll be back momentarily, I think. But yeah, Robbie says Satan's having a field day. Yeah, he apparently is, man. So hey, we must be on the right track. I mean, that's the way I interpret that. We must be getting close to something there. It was funny. Oh, there he is. He's back. Hey, all right. Welcome back, buddy.
Work.
All right.
All that to say that it's not as though what the canon was just completely open question, and everyone's guessing, and we're waiting around, and then we finally get an answer from some council somewhere where there's a lot of horse trading, and we'll let that one in if you let this one in because we want to do this, or something like that. It's like, that's just not what the process was, like it's so boring. The process is so boring that it's just sort of like, yeah, everybody sort of agrees on this stuff and we got to debate it, but it's not like it was, like there's no conspiracy story there to uncover.
Well, no, I don't think that's really where he was coming from about a conspiracy. It's more like, okay, when we read, and we being, let's say, Christians, people that follow the Bible, read through the Bible, and then we say, okay, well, this is, the word of God is given for instruction and for all the, how Paul says, right? It's for all these different things. He's not talking about the letter he's writing though. So like now,
Right.
We look back
Correct.
and we look at it, and that is part of the word of God according to us. But when he was writing it, that's not what he was even referring to. And so I think that's where people, I think it's not like, hey, is there a right way and a wrong way to understand these things? Like many people, including Augustine and other people, this is proper and this is correct and that is incorrect. And they said heretical, if we were using a political contest, this is treasonous, right? Treasonous material you're putting out here, right? And so don't follow that, you'll be led astray and all this stuff. But it's like when you, I don't know if Jim mentioned it in his article, but one of the ideas that I had seen several years ago was, after they found the Dead Sea Scrolls and they started really looking into, this community of Essenes who had preserved those documents.
Yeah.
Why do you think that was the only copy left of those documents? And, one interpretation would be, well, that's just extremely unlucky that all these got destroyed. Another interpretation is that, no, these documents were heretical and therefore they were purged, right?
Which documents?
When they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? But they also found all the other documents relating to how the Essenes lived and the different philosophies that they had as a community. Right.
Yeah. So there were copies of the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament, but also a lot of other stuff too.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like, in many ways,
the other stuff, why was this the only copy? Okay. Sorry.
That's right. And so and it's very possible, and I think highly likely that they were systematically purged, right? Like, so if you look at like, if something was, whether it's like Origen or Tertullian, or some of these early church founders that were later, determined to be, heretics, right? It's like, well, okay, somebody decided they were heretics, right? Mm-hmm. And was that decision made for spiritual reasons that, they got, somebody with a much better understanding was like, no. Here's why we know this is wrong. And so we need to get rid of that because it'll confuse everybody. Or was it more like, actually, that didn't fit into the political narrative we're trying to create around the church and the power that we want it to have and the influence and the different systems that we want to, the scaffolding, let's say, that we want to build here. These aren't conducive to that. So we need to get rid of that. If people have that, then they'll use it to say, well, no, we're not going to do it. And so I think that's really more where some of it's not even confusion. It's an interesting thought exercise. And I'm sure other people have already done it. That's why I wanted to, I know you've gone down this path a long time. So
yeah, it's one of those where it's like that there's so many records and there's so much stuff written by very, very early Christians. Like not just the apostles, but we have writings from the apostles' students. And so, they would say things like, oh yeah, as John used to say this, or as James used to say that. And it's like, you don't see that much variation. I mean, you have some real issues about just how ascetic we're supposed to be. So there is that going on. So there's that passage where Paul says, hey, now I've got some advice for you. This is not coming from God. This is just me. I think you should stay unmarried. Remember that part? And it's like, well, he says it's just his own advice, like, so take it or leave it. And everyone's like, no, it's St. Paul. You've got to, it also is inspired. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, he says it's not. We should believe him, So like there's that discussion going on. There's some other issues involving whether Jesus is subordinate to God or if he's co-equal. That's a huge issue. That's the one that St. Nicholas slapped one of Arius's followers for saying. So there's all sorts of things like that are debates, but we have records of all that stuff, and the stuff that's just not really debated. Like when you're going through his document, it's almost like it would work if you didn't know anything about church history at all, and you were just handed the Bible and you said this was written 2,000 years ago. And that's
even that is not, that's not a complete statement,
But you know what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
Right. Someone said, here's the New Testament. This is the message of Jesus. It was written 2,000 years ago. And then you got to figure out how to make head or tail out of it. Sola Scriptura or something. It's like, wow, who knows what you're going to get in that case. But it's like we actually have all of this church tradition and history to at least let us know, like, are we preaching the same stuff more or less that they were preaching back in 100?
Well, what I think the more interesting question,
yeah.
let's say the more interesting question is to me, and I don't know the answer to this question, but like the more interesting question is not, let's even go back to 100 AD. Okay. And I agree with you. Like, from a certain point, I don't know whether it's 100 AD, but at a certain point, we have enough documentation to
certainly
say
by 100. I'd say more like 50 or 60, but certainly by 100.
Okay, so we'll just take that for the argument as a fact. So from 50 AD on, we have enough literature, written documents, conversations back and forth, writings back and forth, people being excommunicated for this and that and whatever, and there's a certain amount of congruence in it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And in fact, let's use that word congruent. So like it may not be a duplicate. It may not be precisely the same, but it is congruent. Right. So, and I would agree with that statement. Like if you asked me like, hey, what do Christians believe? Like in general, whether it's Catholic, Protestant, charismatic, whatever, I feel pretty confident I could sit down and give a congruent explanation of Christianity. The question that I think Jim is bringing up that I also have is the congruence of church teaching, let's call it, actually an accurate or a complete representation of what Christ taught, right? That to me is the more, so yeah, we could say, look over the say 20, 30, 40 years after Jesus was no longer here.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a tumult, and there were conflicts, and there were arguing about Gentiles and Jews and this and that and all these different things. And then at a certain point, it kind of settled out, and this is what the arrived at conclusion was by this cluster of followers.
And we can just take that as like something that happened. It's a historical thing.
It's a historical thing. It happened. And then we have certain documentation to support that it happened. And then we can draw our own conclusions. I mean, everyone, whether they're Christians or not, can draw their own conclusions about what that means to them. Right. Okay. Fine. The separate question to me is like, okay, but what is the gap, if any, between what Jesus actually, so you figure, okay, here's, if you take the narrative of Jesus being either you could even, in fact, for this question, you could even assume anything you want to about Jesus. You could say he was an enlightened human being. You could say he was a delusional individual. You could say he was 100% God and 100% man, the way that current Christians understand. You could say that he was actually 90% God and only 10% man, who was just kind of here to put he was God in a human suit, the way the Mormons maybe would portray him, right?
An avatar of God.
An avatar, right?
Yeah.
You could say anything you want, okay? But he came here for a reason.
Yeah.
And he had a message that he gave while he was here.
Right.
And then he was no longer here, right? So just
Yep.
taking that frame.
Yep. With you.
Okay. Is whatever he intended to deliver, was it delivered right to his satisfaction? I mean, it was at the time because he left, but since then, how much of it has been bastardized, watered down, shifted?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm with you all the way on this. In your thought experiment here, do we have a set of writings from Jesus himself? Did he write anything in this?
Not that I've ever seen. Have you?
Okay. The stuff that we have from him, of him, like stuff that he said,
the hearsay that was written down. Yes.
Right. Who preserved that?
You would suggest the early church would have preserved whatever they wrote about him.
Right.
So here are the early church disciples. I think Mark wrote his in 60 AD. Is that correct?
So here's the issue.
Yeah. They would have preserved those documents. Yes.
Right. So the problem is
the ones that fit into the congruence of the narrative. They were
exactly.
Yes.
So this is my point, right? So if you're saying, well, look, I want to get a version of Jesus without the influence of the apostles, and it's like, brother, I'm sorry, like that doesn't exist anywhere. Like maybe if you had a vision, you could write it down and be like, I have this new revelation. You know, Joseph Smith did it. You can do it too.
Yeah.
And
well, if history's proven anything, it's proven that people can do that.
People can
lots
do that.
Of people will believe them. That's right.
But I mean, apart from something like that, you're not going to get a version of Jesus that is independent
Separate
from what we have with the
you.
apostles. Other than like, you know, there's that footnote in Josephus's history where he talks about, oh, there was a man Jesus, he was crucified. It was very controversial. He seemed like a good man, you know, and it's like, oh, did even then it's like, did Josephus really write that, or was it added later by the Christians or whatever?
Yeah, well, it's a whole separate question. Was Jesus a real historical person?
Yeah, like okay, whatever, right?
But I'm granting that.
Right. What I'm saying though is that if you're going to take the Gospels, which were written by the apostles or people very closely connected to them, if you're going to remove those, then well, which version of Jesus are you planning to show as incongruent with that? Like, where does that version of Jesus come from? Which, by the way, going back to Palmer's blog post here, we've got the 20 things Jesus didn't say, and this is, I think, a fun lampoon of like evangelical subculture.
It is,
well taken, enjoyed it. But it's like 10 Christian things Jesus would not endorse, right? And then we've got these 10 things here, and then he's like, okay, well, here's what Jesus would do. And he says, here's something that he would agree with atheists on. I'm sure there's lots of stuff, but he lists some stuff. And so here's the part where
why don't you read them and then
So I'll just give I'll give the top 3. I don't want to read the whole thing.
Yeah.
Atheists now and Jesus then reject the invented God of toxic religion. Okay. Atheists now, well, now this one though, it's like, it's not that Jesus rejected the Pharisees' God. He rejected what the Pharisees were teaching about God.
Correct.
But it's not that I reject the God of your toxic religion. I reject your teachings. But anyway,
the toxic teachings, your toxic teachings about God. Yes.
About God. If we rephrase it that way, fine. Atheists now and Jesus then confront and oppose the abuses of corrupt religious leaders. Absolutely. Atheists now and Jesus then do not accept the central doctrines of institutional Christianity, which he says institutional Christianity, the stuff that he identified as like the evangelical stuff, which, yeah, sure. I mean, some of those like Jesus in the American way, like, I don't think he would.
What's Eric Church's song? Jesus, John Deere, and something else.
Yeah.
Jesus, Jim Beer, and John Deere. Yeah, something like that.
Atheists now and Jesus then do not equate being religious with morality or spirituality. Yeah, also true, right? Now, here's the thing. What if I grant you all these and I say, well, wait a minute. Jesus did not equate being religious with morality or spirituality. How do you know that about Jesus? And I would say, oh, it's written down in these books that were written by the apostles. So I don't know how you can get a Jesus apart from the apostles' teaching.
But I also don't know that it's necessary. Again, just for the thought experiment. If the thought experiment is, okay, let's take the early church fathers' writings, right, and contextualize them this way. So let's say that the gospel writers had a reasonably faithful retelling adaptation of what they thought was important about what Jesus said. And since they're not in sync word for word, we know that they're actually just recalling what they remember Jesus saying, right? So I remember Jesus said this. The way they told it was Jesus said, and then Jesus said this, but those aren't actually the words of Jesus. Those are the words that I remember Jesus said, and I wrote it down this way.
Like he preached a lot of sermons. He loved using this illustration. So as we reconstruct one of his sermons, like it's got to go in there, and it shows up in like 2 out of the 4, and we're like, yeah, it probably was.
And they're reasonably similar in the way that. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So let's take that and we say, okay, let's say this is a reasonably faithful interpretation of what Jesus said. Maybe they didn't capture the full meaning, but at least we have these breadcrumbs to follow. And then you have obviously all the church letters. You have like Paul's letters, Peter's letters, Timothy, all these different things. And let's say that those letters, they're not necessarily the word of God per se, but they are a reasonably faithful. This is what I understand about what Jesus said and what he would have wanted us to do in his name now that he's no longer here.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that's a reasonable assumption to make. So for that thought experience, not saying that the Bible is wrong or anything like that. It's just saying these are the words of Christ, the best representation we have to draw from. And this is what the early church fathers thought about what those words meant in the culture and context that they were in.
So you're offering, and so maybe not Palm, or you don't want to put words in Palmer's mouth, but like you're in this thought experiment, you're thinking like
the way I read it and started thinking like, okay, that would be.
It doesn't have to be like some kind of conspiracy. Like, no, the apostles are trying to remember as best they can the sermons as issues come up. They're like, hey, Jesus would not have wanted this. Here's, think about this, and so it's like, okay, cool, but they could have been honestly mistaken about this, or they could have emphasized it a little bit differently than they should have. It's not as authoritative as the sermons that they remembered. They're trying to apply those sermons, but those are the real, those are the real deal, and it's like a shadow of very important.
If you're going to take this assumption and run with it, then you would have to say that, okay, what Jesus was trying to communicate is here, and then how these people attempted to apply those teachings in their life and as honestly as possible in the context that they were in. This is the best interpretation that they could have from it. And then since then, all these other, whether it's Origen or Aristotle, or not Aristotle, Augustine, all these different people, even go today, Martin Luther, whatever, like Calvin, all these people have their interpretations that were on top of all these other interpretations. Right. And it doesn't mean right or wrong. It just, but we certainly can evaluate. And this is where I think Palmer is coming, not to, again, put words in his mouth, but what I was left with after reading that and some other things that he's written and some other things that I've read out there, it's hard not to step back, at least from the Christian church as it expresses itself today in America, and step back and go, dude, this is totally opposite from what we know Jesus said. Like even coming out of this tradition, Jesus said this, and yet the practice in this church is this. And it's not just one church over here that's crazy. Like, what's that one church, the Westwood Baptist or whatever, the ones that make the crazy signs. Yeah. It's not even some fringe. It's like, no, this is the body of evangelical America that says this, right? It's just the same way that Luther looked at what the Catholic Church was doing back in 1500 or whatever, and was like, dude, they're selling indulgence to get out of purgatory. There's not even a purgatory mentioned. What are they talking about? And so were those useful ideas? Purgatory as an idea, they're trying to borrow from the Old Testament, where the Old Testament never mentions hell or anything like that. Literally nowhere in the Old Testament does it mention a lake of fire where people burn for eternity. There's not in the Old Testament at all. So it's like, okay, well, if it's not in the Old Testament, then he was describing something. And so we're just going to basically borrow that concept of whatever that is, and we're going to call it purgatory. And then, of course, there's this other thing that's been illuminated to us called hell. And of course, we're going to help you get out of that too. But so to me, it's not like none of it comes from necessarily a bad, in my thought experiment, and truly my own assumption. I don't read this and go, these were manipulative people that were trying to corrupt the scripture at all. It's more like, dude, we're doing the best we can with what we have. Yeah. But the way that we interpret it today is not through that lens of good people trying to do the best they can. We read it, and there are many churches, including the one we grew up in. Women are not allowed to teach. Men can't have long hair. All these different things because of this particular verse, right? Gay people are going to hell, whatever the case may be. And it's like, dude, that's.
What was the one? Let not the price of a dog be mentioned in my sanctuary. Like, I guess Christians are not allowed to sell their dogs. Right?
You can't sell dogs, not in church anyway.
Not in church.
Yeah, to me, that's if that's the ultimate point that he's making, I actually agree. I don't disagree at all. But to me, it would just open up a much more interesting conversation around like what, if we were to just explore like what would Jesus want us to be doing today, and if he came back today, would he be a Republican? Would he like what America is doing? Would he consider that like we're the new Israel, like some of these I don't know, we call it Christian Zionists or whatever they want to call themselves, but there's all these different, is America a Christian nation? Is Christian nationalism a thing that Jesus would even be like? Yeah. That's an oxymoron. I don't even believe in kingdoms on earth. So, you know what I mean? Like these are interesting ideas.
Yeah, and I think there's the thing that ultimately about that made me not like this article as much
Oh,
as I
this
wanted
is the
to.
one you were saving.
No,
Yeah.
no, 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 no.
Oh,
But this list here, right? The atheist now and Jesus then, whatever. Um, there's elements of when someone is deconstructing, I think there's a tendency to look, and this is something I've seen in common with a lot of these narratives is like everything was wrong. I was it was like the scales fell from my eyes or whatever. I think if you want to do this honestly and go back and be like, what was the authentic message of Jesus? I think you have to be prepared for it to be a lot closer to what's being taught than you want it to be.
well, that
Right.
could be. Yeah.
And so for example, but I mean it doesn't mean that like, all the critiques are going to be bad, but like one example here is uh yeah, atheists now and Jesus then focus on a better world for humankind here and now rather than in some speculative future. And it's like, wow, someone didn't read the Gospel of John. So someone didn't talk about like my father's house or mansions. We don't get the thing about this discussion with Pilate where he says, "My kingdom's not of this world. If it was, my followers would fight for me." Like I'm going so I can prepare a better place for you. So where I am, you can be also all this other stuff. Now you do get in Johannine, the apocalypse. You get the heaven and earth being sort of merged, right? But that is also a speculative future. So it's like, the new heaven and new earth. It's like, no, new earth. It's like, yeah, but that's different from this one. So if you look at it and you say, well, no, Jesus actually does focus on a speculative future, talking about the
Yeah, but he
resurrection
doesn't.
and so
He
on.
doesn't. He doesn't. I think what he's talking about. He's not here for us to interview, but there's many things that Jesus talks about where he's like, look, take no thought for tomorrow, right? Your heavenly Father. Look at the birds. The Father feeds the birds, and He's going to feed you. Don't worry about your clothes. Like He clothes the flowers, He's going to clothe you. Ultimately, you read the whole Sermon on the Mount. It's all about. It's not. He's not calling people to a life of like suffering and whatever else. I mean, yes, there will be suffering, and here's how you deal with it. But it's not like it's not.
Oh, no, I know.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, though, is it's like Jesus has a lot of stuff to say. And some of that stuff is about a speculative future.
Yes.
And if you look at him and be like, no, like he's
It's
not.
not, but he doesn't say he never talked about it. He just said he concerned, but like that wasn't. He did not come saying, uh, "There's nothing for you here. Everything for you is later." That's not
Right, but
he does say that there is something for you later. He doesn't. He does, but it's not. That's not his whole message.
Right. But if you read this document, right, the way it's done is like it's not this, it's that. It's not this, it's that.
Yeah.
Which is all very
Well, he's overly binary there.
Right. So it's like he doesn't focus on he focuses on a better world for humankind here and now rather than on some speculative future. And it's like he does both. So, if you're like, man, we need to get away from the speculative future, it's like, I'm sorry, Jesus is not on board with that, at least as far as the version that we've got.
Would you
But
have
there's
been
a
more
lot of things like this.
Would you have been more comfortable if he said emphasized?
No, I mean that's the thing. It's like he emphasizes both. Like I don't see how you can read it and say this is all about here and now, or this is all about the future. It seems to be like
there's. I think what he again it just when I've heard people make arguments like this, to me, I first go to the same place you did, which is like, well, I don't know. Actually, what about this? Right? There's always a counterpoint. However, if you look at the entire body of things that he said, right, it's like, okay, well, how much as a percentage of that was about people being at peace and people, you know what I mean, versus how much of that was about.
But there's several like number 10 on his list. There's another example of this. Atheists now and Jesus then can leave no better legacy. Okay, so this is the peak, no better legacy than a life of wisdom, compassion, integrity, and love. Okay, now that, by the way, is straight out of an LLM. If you saw how many times I've seen that exact same 4 things come through on a essay, an AI generated essay, you just like, oh, that's that. But anyway, even if you took that, no better legacy than wisdom, compassion, integrity, and love. It's like, really? Like, do you know who talks about repentance more than almost anyone else? It's like, you don't want to repent? Like, you don't want to turn from the wicked ways? And you're like, I mean, Jesus is in a lot of ways extending the ministry of John the Baptist. I mean, John the Baptist is out there.
In some ways, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, this is cool. Like, yes, I have nothing against a life of wisdom, compassion, integrity, and love. But if you said, no, that's actually what Jesus wants. That is the highest thing, is for you to have those 4. It's like, that's not what he says.
I agree with you on that one. That is not what he said. However, what did he say that was the opposite of that? I can't think of anything either. So
no, that's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that list as far as like,
Right.
are these good things? Absolutely. But
I agree with you. I think he let his own value statement sneak in there. If either that or he outsourced the entire thing to AI, as you suspected. So,
but
Jim, if you're watching this, we challenge you to come on here and defend yourself.
But I think that is kind of what I see in this one is, and this is what I see in a lot of the deconstruction narratives, where they want to they don't want to like become atheists. Like, they're not interested in that. There's something still about the pull of Jesus that is like, I can't get away from this guy. But then it's almost like they imagine a Jesus that would be like perfect for them. It's like, I believe everything that Jesus said because it's exactly what I wanted to hear. Yeah. And so then it's like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And so he talks about like the religion-free Bible, and it's like, oh no, this is not the religion-free Bible. This is the my religion Bible. If I had to write a religion that felt perfect to me, this is how I would write it. And it's like, well, that's awesome. Like, I love that as creative fiction. And heck, Jefferson did it too with his, so like, there's
you're not the first to try it. Yeah, that's right.
There's a long literary tradition of that, and I don't have anything against that. But when he says, "Oh, here's a little dialogue from the gospel that I would write," and here we have Jesus.
Oh, yeah,
it's kind of like
I
a
deleted.
guru.
I literally was like,
this is like I'm not, I'm not really that important. It's really about like the love and compassion that my followers will have towards each other, and so you be Jesus now, kind of thing. It's like, yeah. So here's the unkind thing that I'm going to say, okay? And so I apologize, Jim, if I get you wrong. But this is how it sounded to me. This sounded like someone who at 2 a.m. thought to themselves, I wonder if Jesus is more like a spiritual guide. So they opened up ChatGPT, and they're like, I have an idea. I think it's original. I think Jesus is more like a spiritual guide than like someone to be worshipped. What do you think? And ChatGPT said, that is an amazing observation.
What a great insight.
What a great insight. I think it cuts right to the heart of what is true and false in religion in all of our lives. And you're like, oh my gosh, I knew it. I knew I was right. Help me with this essay, because I want to bring down from the mountain this idea, this insight that I've had. And it's like, no problem. Let me help you. And the two of them together brought this into the world. That is what it sounds like to me.
Was it, did you think it was at all similar outside of just the deconstructed narrative? Was there any call outs or echoes of anything that you had read prior to this where you're like, oh, that kind of fits into this camp?
As far as deconstructive narratives?
No, aside from that.
Oh, well, I mean, there's like a lot of those. So like it really did seem like a fairly standard, very nicely written, comprehensive. I'm really glad you brought this one up.
Yeah,
but I mean,
you're welcome.
Do you mean as far as like, does it sound like other religious movements or?
I think it's interesting to, like, again, if you just step back from what you have been taught, let's say, about the way that we were taught. And again, this may not apply to the other people watching this, but like the way that we were taught growing up in an American Baptist fundamentalist interpretation of the scriptures, all those different catchwords that we, and of course I have a couple of years of seminary in that too.
Yeah.
And it's like, as I step back from that, that this idea of, a heavenly Father, right? Which it's interesting because like Jesus uses that word, those words, you're a heavenly Father, right? Yeah. But he also is very clear in saying that, God is not he's his spirit. He's not a human being. He's not, it is. And when he said a spirit, we think of that as some entity that's over there, can move around and maybe, but it's like the idea of like, of the idea of some power beyond ourselves, outside of ourselves, right? So many people over time have had so many different interpretations of that. So Christians and Jews, I would say, and Muslims, like those three traditions, typically view that as a personal being. He's a being, an entity with a name, that exists somewhere, right? Not in the dimension that we can see and touch, but separate from us, right? But then if you look at the way that Hindus interpret God, or the way that I'm just trying to think through different religious traditions, even if you were to look at like the Star Wars interpretation of reality, right? With a force, ironically, the American founding fathers, which, people like to say, oh, they were all Christian. They weren't Christians in the way that we would think of Christians. I mean, they're deists who believe that, God is this, more like that movie Mother that you had me watch, that Aronofsky movie.
Oh yeah.
Very much like that. Like, hey, I'm going to spin this thing up and let's just see what happens, and I'm not all powerful. I'm going to try to intervene here and try to steer things. I mean,
I really care about these things that I've made, but they're sort of on their own.
They're sort of on their own. And then, it's interesting because if you look at, like, I've always said, like if you look at like the Old Testament, especially, like just to understand, okay, like you want to understand, you're a Christian, you want to understand the Christian God. Well, part of that is reading the Old Testament and looking at the way God at least presented himself through the writers that wrote about him as not an all-powerful being. Like, yes, he's a creator. He can create, he can spin things up, but then his creation can go sideways. He can get so frustrated with what he's made that he decides to destroy it, that he actually has regret that he created it in the first place. Yeah. Which I've had those emotions with my own computer. Yeah, I'm nuke the whole thing and start over, right? And which
the word regret actually in the Old Testament is used a lot to refer to God's attitudes, which is kind of strange. It's not always translated as regret, but like, looking back and like, man, maybe this was a mistake.
This is not, again, too, this is not the God that is sold to me in a Baptist church on Sunday morning. Like, that's not the God that is sold to that God is omniscient, all powerful, knows everything, sees the future, knows what's going to happen. It's totally that God, if he existed, would be totally zen. Like, how would he ever have regret or frustration? Like, I knew this was going to happen and here it is. And so no problem. It was all part of the plan, because I knew this was going to happen. It's not somebody who exists outside of time like that would not have those reactions. And so either the writers misunderstood his reactions and wrote something erroneous down, or he did have those reactions, which calls into question the very being that we're being called to understand in this other way. Yeah. So to me, it's like, I think there's, and all of that is really fascinating. Like if you read decades ago, I read like early Gnostic writers, Gnostic Christians, and the way that they understood God, and that actually that the God of the Old Testament was not even really God anyway. Like,
it's kind of like the evil God,
he's like some being that believed he was God, but wasn't God. Yeah. It's a fascinating
trapping our souls in bodies, kind of malevolent, but
yeah. If you ever go back and read early Gnostic writings, it'll like take you down a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah,
to me, those are, and not that I buy
those are the Cathars, if you want an interesting diversion.
I think it's interesting. So many people, I think, search for the truth. I had a buddy of mine call me, and I'll have to let you go here in a minute. I got to go get the kids, but I had a buddy of mine call me a little while ago, and he was asking me, he's like, man, I'm just having a crisis of faith, and do you still believe these things, right? And it was a very interesting conversation, because I was like, well, if you say, do I believe X? And you mean, do I believe X and therefore Y and therefore Z and da 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 da? No. Do I believe X? Yes, I still believe X, but I don't know that those things,
leads to those
all
things.
these things that follow are
Yeah.
actually, I don't even really like when you read like just the Bible that we accept currently, even if we say, okay, let's fast forward and say we accept the 66 books and this is the thing. And even though as recently as Martin Luther, I mean, there's been debates on like what actually belongs in the
Right.
Bible, but let's say that what we pull off the shelf is actually, close to the best truth we can come with. Even with that, I read through, I'm like, I don't know that teaching is congruent with any of this. So like, to me, it's like, but what I asked him in return was, I said, dude, I think what the important question is for you, like, are you still curious? Are you still curious? Like, do you want to know? If you want to know, the minute that you say, I don't know, honestly, the minute you go, I really just don't know,
Yeah.
then something interesting happens inside you. Either you're comfortable with the fact that you don't know. Like, for example, I don't know how to cook most things and I don't care. Right. Like,
That's what
other people
Grubhub is
can cook it.
for. Woo!
Other people can cook it for me. I can go places, and if somebody I know wants to teach me how to cook something, if it means we could spend some time together, I'm all about learning it. Right.
Yeah.
But my lack of knowledge about cooking sciences doesn't bother me at all. Right. On the other hand, it could put you with like, man, I just don't know. And I need to know. Right. Well, okay. So if you feel that pull of like, man, I really want to know, well, then that's to me, like if spiritual things are important to you and you really want to know and you admit you don't know, to me, that's like, okay, well, that's the beginning of a really interesting journey, because I think if the Bible teaches us anything, it's exactly what you said at the very beginning, which is that God is trying to draw us to himself or herself, or however you want to frame your understanding of the spiritual reality that's out there. That whatever that spiritual reality is pulling us to himself. And I think even all great religious traditions, you don't have to take Christianity, most of them say that there's this magnetism that some people, many people feel to. They're drawn to it. They want to understand it. They want to know where they fit into it and all that kind of stuff. So if you're at least curious about it, then you can be drawn somewhere really interesting. And I think down the road where you wind up in your understanding, what you then kind of say, well, I still don't know, but I understand a little bit more than I used to. And here's what I've come to understand. And as you share those things with each other, that's where the real magic of, in my opinion, spiritual understanding actually is. But you also have to get comfortable with the fact that whatever the real truth is, like Einstein said, it's like, dude, the reality Einstein said is reality and the physical universe. Even the reality of the physical universe is like a pocket watch that is sealed shut, and I can't open it. Now I can listen, I can hear the clicking. Maybe I can see the face and I can see the hands move around, and I can conceptualize, oh, there must be a mechanism back there that's moving these hands, and I could even maybe think about it and come up with a machine that was doing that, and maybe I could. And maybe if I drew some gears and all this different stuff, I could come up
actually get close.
I might actually even get close.
Yeah.
But even if I got close or even nailed it, there would be no way to open the watch and actually see, I was right. There's no way to do that on this side of where we are. And so like and again, that's Einstein's take. Maybe he was right, maybe he was wrong. But like, to me, I identify with that so much because it's like, I've met some really spiritually wise people that I thought had, all the things that Paul talks about, the fruit of the Spirit, the love, joy, peace, kindness, forgiveness, all those different things. And I've been, and it's interesting because they're not all Christians. Like there's Christian people, there's Hindu people, all kinds of people I've come into contact with that have like, wow, man, I got a lot to learn from this person about being a better human. And I think maybe his last point that you kind of took issue with, well, it is like, isn't part of your job, the second commandment is to love, your neighbor as yourself. So if I'm not living the highest ideal of that, then I'm not even following the two laws that Jesus put out there as the laws, right? To me, that's an interesting pursuit.
Yeah. And, I just want to add one thing before we go. I've seen so many of these deconstruction narratives, and they all have a lot of things in common. And looking at them, I was like, I wonder why I never felt like this, because I grew up in similar kind of thing. But like, for example, one of the ones he gives, he says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only those who support Christian businesses, listen to Christian music, and watch Christian films.
Right.
And it's like, as a teenager, I remember being like, they were like, oh yeah, non-Christian music, that's the work of the devil or whatever. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. I don't believe that at all. And I'm like collecting people's music as they're like, I need to get rid of these. They're a bad influence on me. Like, I'll take them. So it's like, I'll accept the danger on your behalf. And so it's like somehow or another I avoided all of this, and so like I look back with fondness at my connection to the sort of the evangelical world, but maybe it was because whatever, I found philosophy really early, and so it maybe protected me from being pulled into some of these really negative patterns. But they all seem to have these similar negative patterns around.
Oh, you froze up again, man. Rise, you were delivering the money shot.
I'm back.
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. Anyway, so I wonder, like,
I think
there's got to be something wrong here that they're all calling attention to
that you missed.
Yeah, and I think that because I've seen so many of these narratives, it's where there's smoke, there's fire. This does seem to be happening to a lot of people within that world.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head in that, because you were able to encounter a lot of these ideas and hold them kind of loosely, like, oh, that's an interesting idea. I wonder if I believe that. I don't believe that. Actually, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't apply to me. I'm not, whatever. And you were able to like take what was good for you and let the stuff that wasn't good for you pass on by. That you don't have a reaction to it now because you never. It's like, well, okay, that sucks for you that you had that experience. But I think some of us, like for me, for sure, like I was so like, I need to know and what's correct and what's incorrect and all those different, whatever that instinct is to like to carve,
need the answer,
and choose, and all that kind of stuff. And to me, it's like the people that did that, because I certainly identify with that. Like to me, the people that did that, it's like when you figure out that something isn't exactly the way that you thought it was, or wasn't, that teacher turned out to be whatever, or it's like there's such a sense of betrayal and such a sense of like that then there's even repair that you have to do around that I can just speak to myself. Like I personally have had to go through like things to just kind of get those things flat in terms of like, hey, this is just it is what it is, man, that some people believe that, and
as a Scientologist say you had to go clear.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think that's a really good approximation of what's going on. It's like I'm
not using it ironically. Like,
yeah, it's like you have this thing on your, glad you get that off. Yeah, I know. I'm about to head out. Yeah. All right, man. I got to run.
Good conversation today.